The skin on the back of my neck tightened down, and the hair stood up and began to crawl about. Part 7, the growl. The noise was close. It was a growl, but not a dog's growl. The growl was much deeper, louder than any dog's growl. Something big was growling. I looked through the fog, but could see nothing. The growl got louder. Whatever was growling was coming closer. I determined that the growl was coming from in front of me, so I turned and began to walk the other way. The growl continued to close in. I began to walk faster. The growl got closer. I began to run. I didn't want to run. I couldn't see where I was going, but the growl terrified me. Whatever was making that noise was big, and it was coming my way fast. The growl continued to close in. I was running as fast as I could go. At least that was what I thought. But as the growl continued to get closer, I began to run even faster. Just as I was beginning to think that I wouldn't be able to run much longer, the growl stopped as suddenly as it had begun. I stopped running, bent over, and began to catch my breath. I listened and looked around. The growl was gone. The other noises were back. They had been drowned out by the growl, but they were back. They bothered me, but not quite as badly as the growl had. When I finally had my breath back, I stood up and turned around. I screamed out in surprise and terror and jumped back. Part 8, all my worst nightmares wrapped into one. As I jumped back, I tripped over something and began to fall. I got a brief glimpse at the thing before me, but the glimpse was enough, more than I wanted, because the glimpse terrified me more than anything I've ever seen before in my life. The thing before me was hideous, almost beyond description. It was fiendish looking. It had black eyes, long fangs protruded from its mouth, and it had long claw fingers. It began to change as I looked at it. It seemed to change back and forth between many things at the same time. I think that is the best way that I can describe it. The thing was undescribable. And as I said before, I only got a brief glimpse of it before I fell. Maybe I can describe it better. At least I should try and describe it. The thing seemed as if it changed back and forth between many things all at once. I was seeing all of my worst nightmares at the same time. The thing seemed to change back and forth rapidly between many beasts and creatures. It was all of my worst nightmares wrapped into one. I say that I got a brief glimpse of it, but in that brief moment, I saw all of my worst nightmares, possibly all of mankind's worst nightmares. The sight was horrifying, indescribable. It only lasted for a brief moment, but that moment seemed to stretch out for an eternity. Time seemed to stand still, then go backwards as I was falling. I finally began to hear the noise that had been too low for me to hear before. The noise grew louder. It became almost deafening. It was the sound of screams. There seemed to be millions of them. I added my own screams. I added my own screams to all those screams, but I couldn't hear my scream over top of all the other screams. I finally hit the ground after what felt like an eternity and hit my head. I was knocked unconscious. Part 9, the death train. The boundaries which divide life and death are at best shadowy and vague. Who shall say where the one ends and where the other begins? Edgar Allan Poe. When I came to, I sat up and looked around. I was back in the grassy area below the deck of the pizza pub. Or that's what I thought at first. I closed my eyes and began to rub my head. Then my eyes snapped open when I heard a train whistle. There are no train tracks nearby, I thought. I looked all around. I was still in the grassy area, but it had changed. The lake and deck were gone. All that I could see in all directions was a grassy field. I jumped up and looked around. What the hell is going on? I wondered. The train whistle blew again. I looked all around. There was nothing besides the grassy field. What is going on? Where the hell is the train? There is nothing around besides this field, I thought. The train whistle blew again. It was closer. I looked all around, but saw nothing besides the field. Where is the damn train? I wondered. The train whistle blew again. The ground began to shake slightly. I looked all around. There was nothing there. Nothing besides the grassy field, for as far as I could see in all directions. The train whistle blew again. The ground began to shake even more. I looked all around. There was nothing there. What the hell is going on? Where is the train? I wondered. The train whistle blew again. It sounded as if it was right on top of me. The ground began to shake violently under me. I looked all around. I even looked up. There was nothing there. That's when I began to hear a new noise. It was a ripping sound. The ripping noise was deafening. It sounded as if the very air itself were being ripped apart. The sound was coming from behind me. I turned around and screamed out in shock and horror. I began to shake, and not just because the ground beneath me was shaking. I came very close to filling my shorts, coming through the rip in the air, or possibly a rip in the very fabric of existence. A train was descending from the sky. It was no ordinary train, though. My first thought was of an evil Charlie the Choo-Choo train. On the front of the train was a face, but not an ordinary face. It was demonic looking, with red blazing eyes. The front of the train looked more like a beast than an engine. I guess it was a beast of some sort or another, only it had wheels instead of legs. I stood where I was for a moment, unable to move, as the train bore down on me. The ground shook beneath me. The train began to growl and snarl. Its mouth opened wide. and the eyes blazed even brighter. I finally dove out of the way at the last possible second, and the train went by. It roared out in frustration. I glanced up at the train as it was passing, and I saw this written on the side: the death train. As the cars of the train passed by, I began to see ghostly people staring out at me. The ghost appeared to be screaming. I heard no screams over the thunder of the train, though. I looked back the way the train had come from. It seemed as if the train stretched on forever. I looked back at the cars that were passing me. All the windows were filled with ghostly people. I then began to glimpse what the ghostly people were screaming about. I began to glimpse the things behind the ghostly people in the train. The sight was truly horrifying. The things behind them can only be described as nothing human, not from this world, and worse than any beast that could ever be imagined. I felt as if I were glimpsing something that few had ever glimpsed before, something that few had ever seen. The beast, if that is what they could be called, are beyond my ability to describe. They seem to continually change. I began to realize that the train was slowing down. I had no desire whatsoever to get a closer look at the things on the train. I feared that if I saw them up close, then I would go mad in an instant. I jumped to my feet, turned to run, and stopped dead in my tracks. I began to scream at the sight before me. Then my mind slipped a cog, and my sanity slipped away for a while. Part 10, False Memories, or Memories of Lands Best Unseen by Human Eyes. Into Phaleron, the city of 1,000 wonders. Many have passed, but none returned. Therein walk only demons and mad things that are no longer man. And the streets are white with the unburied bones of those who have looked upon Eidolon Lethe that reigns over that city. H.P. Lovecraft, The White Ship. When I turned to run away from the death train, I stopped in my tracks. One of the indescribable creatures from the train was standing before me. I screamed in terror, and my mind slipped a cog. My mind went away. I do not know for certain what happened while my mind was gone, but I have memories of things that occurred. They may be false memories. I cannot say with any certainty. They may have just been nightmares of the mind. What I do know for certain is that when my mind began to function properly again, I could barely speak above a whisper, as if I had screamed for hours or possibly days. This, more than anything else, makes me believe that some, if not all, of the memories may have been true. I will tell you what I remember. Then you can decide what you choose to believe. I must warn you, though, what follows is quite possibly the scariest thing imaginable. Everything that I have written up to this point pales in comparison. Whether you choose to believe it or not is entirely up to you.
But I, for one,